Let's go. Come on in, let's go to where the pictures show, where the hero wins and the monster grins, and everybody knows that face up in those bright projector lights.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Also Starring. I'm Dan,
And I'm Morgan.
and today we are here to talk about a movie called Dazed and Confused, starring Joey Lauren Adams, Mila Jovovich, Parker Posey, Matthew McConaughey, and also starring Ben Affleck, who was in our last episode for Zack Snyder's Justice League. This is a movie that was written and directed by Richard Linklater, who's famous for Slacker, which he did before this, Waking Life, A Scanner Darkly, and the Before trilogy. Yeah, what
His
else did he
famous
do?
one is the boy that grows up. What's it called? Boyhood.
that was
yes.
good.
Yeah, that movie was a trip. I feel like him and like Kevin Smith have like a symbiotic bond or something like that. Like kind of
Yeah,
came up at the same time. And
Kevin Smith has definitely said that Slacker like inspired him to make Clerks. So
okay,
you're definitely onto something there.
Then there's some similarities in this movie and Mallrats too. I can talk about.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's casting and stuff too.
Kind of.
Yeah. And Chasing Amy. I mean, that pairing of Ben Affleck and
Joey Lauren Adams
is in all three of those.
The acting in this, I think this movie is really underrated for the acting. I think it's really amazing. Some of the stuff that they pull off.
Yeah, I mean, especially since it sounds like almost all these kids were like unknowns or first time actors. It must be so cool to do like a cast reunion for something like this. If they ever do it, like for
would be fun.
All these guys to get back together and be like, yeah, we were all like in our first movie together.
This was definitely the movie that made McConaughey famous for his like catchphrase of all right. And
I mean, he's like a natural born movie star. I didn't realize this was like the first thing he ever did. He seems so like.
Was it his first, or was Texas Chainsaw Massacre or The Next Gen his first?
I mean, I'd have to look. That might have been, but the interview I saw, he referred to it as his first, but he also didn't want that Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie to get released. So
the movie is not good.
This
movie he's really good in, but he's also, I feel like, been playing a version of the same character for like his entire career until probably about 2010, and then he kind of broke free.
Well, he did True Detective, and he did the Dallas Buyers Club.
That was it.
Yeah. That was like the year everyone referred to as.
He got into a Christopher Nolan movie too.
Yeah. So this movie came out in 1993, but it is actually set in 1976. It's basically a series of vignettes following the hijinks of some high schoolers and like graduating junior high school kids in a small Texas town during their last day of the school year and the first night of their summer. What do you think about this movie? Because I actually didn't have a fond memory of this movie when I first watched it, but watching it this time made me appreciate it a whole lot more. And I'm really glad that you suggested it, because I was awesome. Like when you suggested it, I was like, yeah, all right.
So my memories of this movie are at my buddy Brian Skiff's house, watching this like a few dozen times over the course of a few years, because back in the day you just had the VHS or the DVD or whatever, and if you got something that you kind of laughed at or thought was funny, you would just put it on all the time. That was what you did. And so I've watched this movie a ton of times, and I thought really nothing about it before. And then I showed it to Saria maybe a year ago, and I was like, you want to see like where McConaughey came from, like what his roots were? And she's like, oh yeah, let's do that. So I put it on, and then we had a really good time watching it. And I was like, this movie is like really good. Like it's just a good it's got that level of not dark humor, but almost like above like a normal high school movie humor. You know, what they can say. Like there's a lot of sex jokes and there's a lot of like things that you probably couldn't get away with now.
It's
But
not raunchy in
it's
any way.
not
It doesn't feel
raunchy. Yeah.
exploitive or anything, but
It does a good job. And then I think the soundtrack kind of drives this entire movie. Like it
oh god, the
basically
soundtrack's
just
great.
is a soundtrack. Like the entire time is like a famous song. Every
Yeah.
single scene is a new famous song from the 70s or late
Since
60s.
you brought it up, I'll just run down real quick because I started keeping track and then I like gave up halfway through.
Yeah.
It's like
You
Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith,
Yeah.
School's Out, Alice Cooper, Why Can't We Be Friends, Low Rider, Hurricane by Bob Dylan, Paranoid by Black Sabbath, and then I was just like, all right, I can't keep doing this.
Dude, and then you got Edgar Winter, you got Foghat. I mean, it just keeps going and going. And then every single time the camera moves to a new location it just starts out with a new jam that you've definitely heard on the radio at some point in your life. And you're like, it makes a movie extremely relatable to like any time. I don't know anybody that wouldn't know like this entire soundtrack, you know.
I wonder how much of their budget they spent
That's
on the music.
That's what I was wondering too. I never really thought about it till today, and then I thought, Jesus, did they just blow like $10 million on the soundtrack?
The soundtrack like lures you in, and then you're like kind of engaged by that, and the stuff that's happening on screen is like, you know, it's not some crazy plot or anything. It's pretty just situational, but it's actually well written. Like I wrote it off when I was younger because I was like, oh, it's just like
stoner comedy,
like, you know, these jocks who are just like, it's like just mean humor and like sexist jokes and stuff like that. But I realized watching it this time, I was like, no, it's really smart, and it's really just like taking one reviewer called it like an anthropologist's look at like high school kids, because like it's like like this is how I remember kids being, you know. So to try to clean it up and make it more like sanitized would be less artistic, I think.
You're right, and I think there's a trope or two in here for sure, but at the same time there's a lot of things that could have been tropes that aren't. I remember kids kind of intermingling. It wasn't very clear defined. Oh, those are the jocks, those are the art kids, those are like other shows or other movies have shown. This one's not like that, where everyone kind of knows each other because they all go to the same school. It makes way more sense in that sense, and that's how I remember high school being. Was more, it was less, it was more gray than like well defined. Like you can't talk to that person or stuff you've seen.
There's the kind of lead character who's like this football player who's like hanging out with the stoner crowd a little bit more, and there's some friction because like he's maybe having second thoughts about even playing football next year, and like his coach doesn't like that he's hanging out with these other kids, and then he's got his like football jock friends who like don't really like that he's veering away, and they make jokes about him hanging out with them, but at the same time, like in the very next scene you'll see, you know, one of the other jock kids hanging out with him with the stoner kids, and it's like no
fine.
big deal.
It's kind of like your background right now. The guy on the right is a jock, and the guy on the left is a stoner guy. There's no plot really other than the fact that it's their last night of this particular day of the year, and the school's out for some folks, and then other folks are like, I'm gotta go back for another year. The fact that they brought in the junior high kids, I think that's probably what made the movie really enjoyable and relatable, because you get these kids that are like looking forward to something, and then you got these guys that are like faced with a decision, and so now you kind of get both sides, but they all end up kind of doing the same thing, which is being kids. They're not really, there's no real responsibility at all. They just want to kind of go party and hang out.
Yeah, and that's what I remember high school being like for me. It was just like driving around.
A lot of driving around. Where's the party? Where's something going on? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, apparently he pitched it as like American Graffiti set in the 70s, and like I hadn't really thought about that, but it's pretty true. It's pretty on point. I noticed right off the bat there seemed to be like this mirroring of the junior high school jocks running around like trying to haze the incoming freshmen with the paddle boards, which is like kind of a big plot point for the first like half of the movie, and then it kind of goes away. Ben Affleck is like the biggest asshole among them, which I think is a great casting choice.
He also flunked his
Yeah.
senior year, so he gets to do it again. And then
Yeah, right.
people are like, why did this guy get to come out as again? What a
Yeah.
jerk.
Yeah, like they hang out with him, but you kind of get the feeling that everyone kind of thinks he's a dickhead. But what I noticed was like, so there's these, these upperclassmen who are chasing around these like eighth graders, essentially trying to like paddle them. And then at the same time, there's these direct flashing back scenes between that and then this commitment contract that the coaches are trying to get all the football kids to sign, saying like, I will not, drink or do smoke pot or
just say no.
They're trying to do this to juniors in high school, which is like, by that point, like that's when everyone starts experimenting with stuff. That's when I started experimenting with stuff. And like,
and he never stopped.
But it's just it's this. So one of the characters refers to it as like neo-McCarthyist bullshit or something like that. But it just got me thinking the way that they're like mirroring these two things. It's like there's this rebellion amongst this lead football character kid because he doesn't want to sign the contract and he's not sure if he wants to go back, and he's like sort of like bucking at the restrictions of like the adults above him. And then there's like his same generation is like hazing the kids below them, and the girls are doing it too, and they show it's like this whole thing where it's like this whole initiation where they have all the junior high school girls like dropping to the ground and they're like spraying them with condiments and pouring like junk all over them. And it's like it started to make me think like, what are these hazing rituals if not like preparing you to be like the coaches that this guy is like rebelling against,
For sure. I mean, the teacher just smiles when the junior high school teacher just smiles when he hears the guys on the loudspeaker and they're calling the kids out, and he's asking them, who's gonna get hurt first. And the teacher, I mean, nowadays being like cops involved and stuff, like back then the teacher just smiling like ha ha ha. So yeah, that's a good point that I didn't think about the training aspect of it, but it's a bit funny, the hazing ritual, because I feel like they do a good job showing people why they're doing it, because somebody else did it to them, but they don't really know why they're doing it, right?
That's my whole point. Is like it's like a socialization of this like,
well, someone did it to me, so I got to do it to you.
And it's that, I mean, that's the kind of thing that like that really like upsets me, but I think that the movie is smart because it's acknowledging it in a way.
Well, there's the two intellectual kids that are in the movie, and they're the ones that are making the commentary on it, and they ultimately end up getting in fights and things like that because they have to stand up for what they believe in and realize that if they don't have any kind of fight back, that they're gonna be mad at themselves their entire lives. So it's kind of interesting to see their in such a short period of time, their arc, coming from being kind of dorky guys that just play poker all the time. They get invited to a party, and then he's like, oh no, we're going to go play poker tonight. And it's the last day of school, but they're like, why would you do that? And they kind of like have this realization like, oh yeah, we should go to this party instead. And ultimately the party ends up getting canceled because the guy that is going to have the party, the beer kegs show up to his house before his parents leave. And so he has to like go explain to them why this guy made a mistake of delivering these beer kegs to their house. And then the dad's like,
the wrong address, buddy.
We're not going anywhere. And the wife's like, but Harold or whatever. It's like really good.
The dad was cast so perfectly.
He knew immediately, but he let the kid like try to figure it out, and then he couldn't figure it out. And then he did figure it out kind of, but he's like, yeah, you're full of shit.
Yeah, it was great because it was like he wasn't ever like really like bullying or like anything like that to any of the kids, but it was just like his presence just scared everyone away.
Yeah, he's just like, we're staying here. Very good.
Yeah, they end up just kind of like all the different kids driving around trying to figure out something to do until Matthew McConaughey, who's sort of like this kid who's already graduated. I don't even know how old he's supposed to be.
He said he's been working for the city for a couple of years. So yeah, probably 21, 22, something 21. Like that. He has like a cool factor to him. So like people tolerate him or like they still want to be around him. But
Yeah.
He's pretty
But he's
open about
creepy.
why he's hanging out with them. Like he wants to
Yeah.
be around young girls to like hang. And
Yeah.
somebody at one point makes a comment like, "You're gonna get arrested." That's and he
It's
kind of just
very
shrugs it
gross.
off and then says something like cavalier about it. And then you kind of think, when I watched this when I was 18 or 17, I thought, "Oh, this is so funny," But now watching it as 20 years later, I'm thinking,
Oh yeah.
this
I
guy's a
thought, I
piece of
mean,
shit.
I thought it was gross at the time, but he just makes me laugh. Like the first thing he says, or he's like, you got any weed, man? It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
Every line that he has in
He
this has followed
he
him through
looks
his
like a
entire career.
he looks like a Muppet when he laughs after that line. It's just so like, what are you? Are you even a human being?
I think they were probably actually stoned while they were
Oh,
making this.
probably.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, he kind of has his eyes are kind of like fucked up looking when he's. Anyway, there's a lot of McConaughey that has followed him his entire career that came from
yeah.
this movie. His all right,
Yeah.
all right, all right.
Yeah.
The thing I love about high school is that I keep getting older and the girls keep staying the same age. I mean, that kind of stuff is yikes. But at the same time, that it's hilarious because he's like kind of a caricature of that guy or whatever.
Yeah. And you know that eventually it's going to catch up to him.
They have like a little bit of inkling towards that when he's talking about like working for the city and he's like, well, I got money in my pocket. And then the younger guys are listening in and saying like, oh, that's cool to have money in your pocket. Because at another point, one of the 8th graders that's hanging out with them, Mitch, says it to a guy that he's buying beer from that thinks he's 18 or whatever. And he quotes him almost word for word. So it was a really good way to depict how impressionable young kids can be and how they pick up stuff from people and I think there's a lot of that in this movie. They're trying to show like how you can influence younger people, you can influence your peers, peer pressure, whatever, very easily, and that's kind of how the world works. But there was a lot of good points to the counter of that too, by spreading the story over a bunch of different types of characters. It does a good job balancing out. It's not just about like, oh, let's go get wasted or neo-McCarthyism, right? It's both.
Yeah.
It's got both in it, and that's I think why this movie is pretty awesome.
It's awesome also because it's one of those movies that's like it's kind of whatever you bring to the table with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't like it when I was younger because I thought it was celebrating and glorifying like bullying, like sexist, like the McConaughey. Like I thought it was like, look how cool these kids are, and I thought that was terrible and stupid. And I also thought that there were a lot of kids my age or a bit older than me who really liked this movie because that's what they got out of it. You know what I mean? Like they thought,
Totally,
oh, how funny these guys, like, oh, this is so awesome or whatever. And I don't think the movie is really celebrating any of I mean, maybe it casts some romantic light on some of the magic moment of high school, like towards the end of the movie, but it just sort of seems like a snapshot, of a moment in time.
it is a snapshot,
both specifically this era and also kind of universal for like all high school kids.
There's a pretty interesting dynamic between what the characters are saying and what the real world is, because they think they have it figured out, or they're like, oh, I'm going to this concert. Like all McConaughey is interested in the movie is like getting chicks and like going to like this Aerosmith concert. But if you notice during the entire movie, he doesn't really pick up any girls, and then at the end he kind of gets like this one kind of dorky girl that's like interested in him.
Girl. Yeah.
And he doesn't really have a lot of game. He's not really like that smart or that suave. He just kind of appears to be suave or smart to like these guys that are younger than he is, and so they just think he's cool, but no one really has anything going for them. They're just kind of pretending that they understand the world, and it's just a snapshot, like you said. But it's also, when you watch it when you're an adult, you're kind of like, these dumbasses, like, they have no idea what they're about to get themselves into. And none of the things they're saying are correct.
But yeah.
What was your favorite scene in this movie?
I like all the stuff with the nerdy kids driving around. Maybe that's because that's what I relate to the most out of all of it. And the kid at the end, like, I like that he has this whole plan to fight the bully, and the one kid who's kind of nerdy decides like you said, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna regret this my whole life if I don't stand up to him. So like he devises this whole theory of like most fights get broken up within the first minute or two. And so he's like, if I could just get like one or two good punches in, then someone will pull him off me and it'll be okay.
Yeah,
And it's
I don't
like
want to
his
upset the
plan,
herd, and the herd will
yeah,
come and protect me. And then his friends are
plan
like,
kind of
"What?"
works. It does kind of work though. I mean, he gets his ass kicked, but like he
It
does get
doesn't
the
work at all.
he
He
does
gets
get
his
the
ass
one good
beat.
punch in.
Like, yeah, he gets one punch in, I guess, but the guy, I don't think the punch did very much. It caught him off
Mm-mm.
guard. Anyway,
Yeah.
he
No,
gets his
no,
ass kicked. One thing I wanted to bring up about this movie that I thought was very interesting is that the actresses that you mentioned at the beginning of the movie, they're barely in this movie. Joey Adams is barely in this movie. Mila Jovovich is a stoner, and she's barely in this movie.
Jovovich is very noticeable though. I mean, they're all like beautiful girls, but Jovovich is just like,
She's a
I don't know.
standout because she's like a model. So when she's in
Yeah.
the movie, you're kind of like, okay. But it's definitely got some characters that I don't know their names as actors, like the guy that in your background right now. I remember him. I can't remember what his name is, but he's in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, and that's what I really remember him from.
It's so funny with him. Like, I hate his character at the beginning of the movie, but then by the end, I kind of like love him. It's so like that's how those people were, Like, I remember in high school there were a lot of kids like that who I was like, fucking hate you, but then by the end of high school I was like, you're just like a lovable schmuck. Like,
Yeah,
it's so funny.
you get to know him, right?
Yeah. The other guy is Rory Cochrane.
Okay.
But he was also in Empire Records.
Yes.
As like, the artsy kid.
Yeah.
He was in Argo. He's in Scanner Darkly. He's in a bunch of
so he
stuff.
must have stayed friends with Affleck and Linklater.
Yeah. He was in Black Mass with Johnny Depp. Like, he's in a bunch of shit. I feel like he's maybe does the most actual like work. Did you have a favorite scene?
No, I think there's just too many little things that go on. I do love the part when the kids get revenge on Ben Affleck after he's paddling the crap out of all of them, and then they decide like, oh, this guy's an idiot. Let's just take him out. And so they start pouring paint on him, and then he's like, what the hell is this? And he looks up and gets doused. And then he goes and tries to fight everybody that is laughing at him. And that's the last time that you see his character in the movie. But until that point, he's in, I don't know, a good chunk of the movie just being a jerk to everybody. Yeah. And then he gets his own, and then you just never see him again. I just feel like that's a very like characteristic of people that think they're tough, is they act tough, and then as soon as they get served, they can't handle it, and they kind of fade.
For sure.
So I enjoyed that scene a lot because it's.
I mean, I would say there's a great element of like performance on Ben Affleck's part in that scene. Like, it's just him stumbling around the street, like half covered in paint, just like fuming and cursing at everybody. And it's awesome. It's really well done. Yeah. And it got me thinking, kind of like, I wonder if a part of the reason why some people just like hate Ben Affleck, like as a person, and they can't even put their finger on why, is because he played characters like this and the character he played in Mallrats.
Could be, yeah.
Even like the guy in Chasing Amy to some degree is kind of gross.
Not the same kind of gross, but yeah.
It's not as bad as these guys. But like, it's like he he was a good actor and people thought that was who he really was. And then he tried to like do other stuff. And then people are like, no, you're an asshole.
You're a sleazehole. Yeah. Did I just make a word, sleazehole? The last thing that I will say about this movie is that meeting up in a field to have a drink fest or like a big party is like so high school, that like that kind of stuff is so what I remember, especially being like junior, senior level. You get kicked out of the house or there's no place to go. And so there's like some field that somebody like knows about. Then you end up there with kegs and stuff. That exactly like high school. So well done. It
was made for 6.9 million and its box office was 7.9 million. So, but I also I bet there wasn't a ton of marketing, so like maybe they made some money.
Is there numbers for after,
like home video?
Yeah, like cult status.
I mean, that's not on Box Office Mojo, but for this movie, it would be worth looking up because it's definitely had an afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
It's not a movie that I don't think. Well, obviously with those numbers, it didn't do well at the beginning. But
Yeah.
a lot of these folks you'll have seen in other movies, and then you'll recognize them when you look at that we named a few here, and it's definitely stood the test of time. It's still as good today as it was when
it's
I first
really
saw it.
well liked by critics, which I didn't even realize. Like it's got like a 78 on Metacritic and a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I think as an adult you can appreciate this movie more than a kid.
Yeah.
It was probably marketed
It surprise me
fairly
now.
badly.
It would have surprised me then that it was that well liked. But
Did you watch the original trailer? Sometimes that's a good clue as to how they were marketing it.
No, I bet it's terrible.
It's probably really like cut like
awful.
stoner high school movie. Yeah.
Do you know what other movies came out this year?
Jurassic Park
and which one that we already talked about? Our second episode. Last Action Hero.
Yeah. Oh shit. So Jurassic Park is the only movie that anybody cared about in 1993.
Yeah, for sure. You know what else came out that year? Fucking Army of Darkness I saw on the list. I was like, oh no shit. It was way down there on the list, like close to this one. I was like, oh man, Army of Darkness was a flop too.
I remember seeing the marquee when I was coming out of a movie, seeing Army of Darkness and being like, oh, that sounds scary. When I was a kid.
I remember having comic books and there would be ads on the back page, like the back cover of the comic book of that one poster of him standing there with like the little
his Star Wars poster. Yeah, absolutely.
What is this? I hadn't seen like Evil Dead yet or anything, so it was just like,
well, did you ever hear that they were going to call it Medieval Dead, and then for some reason they just went with Army of Darkness, and I don't know why they missed that.
That's such a great title.
I know, like, that's what it was supposed to be originally called, and they didn't do it. I know. I want to thank you for listening. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And
we are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, and we are now in the Apple podcast store. So you can just go to, if you're an iPhone user, just go to your podcast app and search Also Starring, and you can listen to us.
Yes.
Your heart's content. And that'll be it.
All right.
Thank you guys. I'm Dan.
I'm Morgan.
See you next time.
Well, you might recognize someone here tonight, some thespian also starring in a movie that you